Welcome back to another episode of the HIT podcast. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where I bring you real-life stories from some of the most interesting leaders of our sector. Today, I was delighted to be joined by David Ripley, Executive Director of Customer Services at 13 Group. David discusses at length the journey that 13 have been on from a customer service perspective, how he manages the ever-changing expectations of needs of the customer. We talk about digitalisation at length. We also look at how the rent cap may change the services that we can provide for customers and what that might do to the sector. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. David, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thanks, James. Nice to see you, be with you today.
Thank you. And I always start in the same way, but just for the purpose of the listeners, could you do us a bit of an introduction to yourself, David?
Yeah, no problems. I'm currently the Executive Director of Customer Services at 13. I've been with 13 about 5 years now. We're a regional provider up in the northeast of England with a lot of stock throughout Teesside and some a little bit further afield as well. But spend the majority of my days trying to help get services right for customers.
Perfect. And as I always like to find out is kind of how did you get into the sector? What's your journey into housing?
My journey into housing is probably a little bit familiar to some people, but I was doing a gap year where I'd gone after university to America, and I was teaching people to play golf, which is not the usual thing that you do. And being honest with you, I just ran out of money at the end of that, and I had to come home, and I needed to get a job. It was a job at a small provider, Three Rivers, which is now Benicia up in the northeast of England, and I ended up applying, and that's how I ended up getting into housing and starting my journey. And it was a development team at the time, so there was no great career plan. There was no master stroke of genius thought. It was just a sector. I needed a job. I found one, and then just really grew to love it and what the sector stands for and what we try to do.
Yeah, and how did you kind of transition into customer service then? You mentioned development, like what roles have you done within housing that's led you to this exec director of customer service role, would you say?
Yeah, no, so I've had variety of roles. I also left housing as a sector for a bit. So I've worked in development teams, corporate strategy teams. And then when I left the sector, I went and worked in finance teams and business change teams. And I think where I ended up in customer services, I think at the heart of any housing association is people, and whether they be customers or whether they be colleagues. But without those people and without those great services, you kind of got to ask yourself, what is it that we stand for? And I think that's what really, really drove me in terms of my career, is trying to make, I suppose, opportunities for people to be the best that they can be in whatever they want to be, and whether that be a customer or a colleague. And I think sort of in terms of my role now, I've really found a home to kind of try and do that and help people on that journey, really. So it's great day in, day out. I get to see some of the weird, the wacky and the wonderful all in one go. I think really working with people and really sort of developing them both as customers and colleagues is something that's really great and one of the really best things about my job.
Amazing. And just for the benefit of listeners, I suppose, just give us a helicopter view as we stand here today, then 13 Group. Just give us a bit of the kind of helicopter view of what that business is.
Yeah, no, sure, James. So we own and manage around about 36,000 homes. They're predominantly there in Middlesbrough, Stockton and in Hartlepool, but we do have stock up in Northumberland, and we do have stock down in Hull through some recent acquisitions, and we're looking to work and broach into Leeds and areas in West Yorkshire as well. So like a lot of listeners and organisations they work in, we own and manage a high portfolio of general needs stock, but we also do supported housing, sheltered housing, employability projects. We deliver services for ex-offenders as well. And then right through the spectrum, we do sort of development homes, new build for private market sale in private market rent as well. So we've got our full spectrum of housing services from the moment you want to come into a house to the moment that you want to leave a house.
Perfect. And you've been there 5 years, have you, roughly, joined the business 2017, was it? Or how long have you been there?
Yes, it was. Yes, 2017, so 5 years there. Just past the 5-year anniversary, actually.
Lovely. Did you get a clock or a watch or anything?
Oh, you've got to do a few more yet before that, James.
and what's changed? Like, I know 13 Group have gone through quite a lot of change in that period of time, but what did you inherit, and kind of what was the business looking like then, and what's changed in that period of time, would you say?
Yeah, no, so sort of the journey I think that we've been on at 30, and I think the first thing that I always say is that we've got to have a recognition that we don't always get it right. So when it comes to dealing with customers, because I think too often we can sit and we can talk about how great things are, but we kind of lose track of why we're doing it. So when we come in to looking at how we deliver for 30, we had a very, what I would call, generic model. A bit of everything everywhere, supported with some specialist teams. And what we've tried to do is really take that model and move it on to what we are focusing on primarily as our area-based working. And what we're trying to do is really put our colleagues into working with customers in a way that really engages them to, one, use the skills that they've got throughout their careers, whether that be hard skills or soft skills, but then also give the best service to the customer. We're trying to get that what we see in time is that customers are able to use the choice that they want. So whether that be to contact us on the phone, online, or in our store, they can use all of those options that they want. And I think that's been part of the journey, I think, to make us probably become a little bit more customer responsive. So when I started in this role, a lot of the feedback that we had from customers and stakeholders was that we'd potentially become a little bit too corporate. In its nicest sense, but what we needed to do is really connecting with customers, connecting with communities a bit more. So it's like the high street store that we opened, we're a prime venture into that to make us more accessible in a new way for customers, but in a way that met their needs.
Okay. And you know, you say about the needs, etc., but I've been in the sector now 10, 12 years, and I'd say that expectation and the needs of the customers changed significantly in that period. But how do you manage that ever-changing expectation and need of a customer?
Yeah, no, I think when it comes to what customers want, I think we always internally try to talk about two very simple concepts. It's kind of looking back at time and thinking about Henry Ford and his, if I'd asked customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses in analogy. And then also the analogy that comes from British Airways, I think it was, about trying to cater for the blind nun. And what we're always trying to do is think, well, not that we always know best, that what we need to do is understand, well, actually, what is sentiment like with customers all the time? One of the best ways that we do that is to be continuously in neighbourhoods and communities and talking and having that active conversation. But within that, kind of what you find is that customer sort of need in perception of the organisation, it's fairly stable over time, is what I would say. So they want their repairs done quickly, they want their rents to be as cheap as possible, and in those things that people in this sector know are key. What we've got to then manage is, as opposed and understand, is the best way to do that. And a lot of what I encourage the team to do, and we try to do, is to get out there and see other things from other places, really interact, because I think when you can start to understand some of the sort of the changes that are coming in service industry, so if you look at things like retail and how they've developed over it, it's not saying that we need to be like that, but what we need to do is understand, well, what are the good bits of that and how does that work for our customer base? So I think it's that continual learning that I always encourage in sort of myself, but also in the teams that we're trying to do in being in touch. And I think the biggest thing for me is that it is being in touch and mindful of customers. So I think within housing associations, we have rafts of data, we have wealths of data, and we even have data that we've collected for so long everyone's forgot about why we were collecting in the first place. Yeah. But I think what we've sometimes got to do is take all of that and step back and have a bigger view and say, well, actually, what looks and feels right? And sometimes just putting ourselves in that shoe and say, well, actually, how would I want to rent a house? How would I want to get a repair service? And I think it's about using all of that insight and intelligence and then really speaking to your customers face to face and understanding what it is that their problem is and how you can solve that for them.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think it's interesting you mentioned some of these businesses as well. Like, do you take any of your inspiration from some of the other service sectors, or do you generally look within the sector for the answers that you find on customer service?
Yeah, no, I will unashamedly admit that we've always pinched stuff from other people. Because
I think we all do, don't we?
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time when we developed the touchpoint program within 13, which looks at our touchpoint high street store, the My13 platform as examples. And what we used there is a lot of good ideas that other people had already done, but we brought them together in a way that matters to us. So our high street store in Stockton High Street, which people are welcome to get in touch with and visit at any time, takes the concepts of how Metro Bank has started to change banking in that sector, the Apple Store and how that changed your interaction with technology, and also some of the travel agents and how they deal with, I suppose, difficult situations. So one of the things that we were fascinated on our learning journey, and we went to see some of the travel agents, was that people don't necessarily think about a customer who's booked a holiday, but then maybe their partner passes away, and how do you actually deal with that? And they've got some little tricks and some little quiet rooms and the ways that the stores are set out that you would never know when you walk into it, because it just looks like an open platform. But out the back, there's another world in some of the bigger stores. And those learning visits, and I think Virgin Money was another one. But those learning visits, what we did is we looked at all of the great things that they'd done in I think sectors that deal with some of our challenges, client confidentiality, how to have a personalized conversation in an open forum. And actually we moved it on, because I think a lot of the challenge that we had was that we looked at things through a very sterile lens, which was, well, you need a counter, you need a quiet interview room that's got panic buttons and all of that kind of stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, there is potentially client groups and areas of service that need that, but actually your general day-to-day don't really need it. And then what we did is we took from those hard looks at things, because again, I go back, the offices and the places don't make things, but we took a lot about, well, how did those organizations train and engage colleagues? How did they train them in diffusing difficult situations? How did they engage them in empathetic conversations with people who are really struggling with things? And I think it's all about bringing that together. And then we also layer that with some stuff in sector as well. So some of the stuff that places like Yorkshire Housing have done, Halton Housing have done in time. We've been down to Optivo. So we always like to have a look around the sector and see what is going on and what can we learn from others as well at the same time.
Yeah. And I want to come back to the place you've created, because it sounds fascinating. But the first thing that you mentioned there, which is interesting, is on touchpoints, how do you instill that belief, those values, those behaviours into your staff? Because I'm just imagining here 13 Group will have loads of touchpoints through loads of different teams with your customer. How do you instill that culture of great customer service throughout your teams? Because I was talking to someone the other day about this, and they used John Lewis as the example, right? It doesn't matter what level you are, you're constantly being trained on how to deliver good customer service at all levels. How have you gone about that at 13 Group?
Yeah, look, in a similar fashion, James, what we're in the process, we started about a year and a half ago. We introduced a very simple concept. If people are not from, well, people can probably tell from now I'm from Newcastle, so I use a slightly different word, but we introduced the concept through Michelle Younger, our Director of Experience, about the mam and gran concept. A mam, for anyone who doesn't know, is a mother, just in case it's not clear. But effectively what we were looking at there is, in any interaction that we have, whether that be on the phone, in person or via written communications, is what you do as a colleague, would that make your mum proud, and would you treat your gran like that? Yeah. And it was that really simple way that we started, because what we wanted to do, and I think lots of people that work in our sector have a very, very high level of social aptitude, and they're driven by helping people. I mean, we've done a lot of training programs and work, in some of them had worked, but had never really embedded, and it hadn't stuck. So what we wanted to do is really appeal to people on a deeper, more empathetic level, which is where mam and gran came from. We've now got tradespeople who talk about that. They come and they give us our examples. We use a lot of those examples to then, I suppose, refresh for colleagues. Actually, look, this is what good and great can look like, and how we interact with people. And it doesn't have to be the big hard ones. This is sometimes just really simple stuff as well. And then what we're also doing at the moment is we're refreshing our program, and we're going to continually take the whole business through it. And I think that is vital when it comes to customer services, because I think one of the big things I've always talked about is executive director of customer services. Everyone looks at you and goes, oh, it's a customer, it's Dave's issue, or it's Dave's team's issue. But actually, all of us have that interaction with the customer. So whether we're in a development team producing a new house, whether we're in the investment team, repairing a home, whether we're in the finance team producing the rents. You kind of always have that touch point and that interaction. And that's where touch point as a concept within 13 came from. And what we're going to do is take the whole business through that now to start to bring it forward and get it into the psyche more as we go. And I'm the first to admit it's far from perfect, and it's always going to be a journey. But what we like to do with those simple little things like Mam and Gran is always get people to think in the moment. Because I think where we got to with services is you can have the best digital platform, the best processes in all of the world, but at some point the nature of what we do relies on a person, and that person can be in a whole host of situations. You and I both know you can have a good day and a bad day, and colleagues, we firmly believe, and I firmly believe, don't come to work to do a bad job, but sometimes they'll have a bad day. And actually what we're just trying to do is allow them to have simple tips and tricks that allow them to be their best version of themselves day in, day out. And actually, if they don't feel great in that day, can they work with a colleague to solve that problem if we all think in the same way?
Yeah, and it starts from good recruitment as well, doesn't it? It's like instilling that customer service right through every part of your process, recruitment, onboarding, induction, right through to kind of promotions and development. So it's an interesting concept. And tell me a little bit more about this high street. What's it called? What do you actually call it?
It's called the Touchpoint store. So the Touchpoint store was an early incarnation, probably around about 2018 that we had the idea. And this, as I say, was based on some of the feedback we'd had from customer service, customer perception service, stakeholder service, and things of that nature. And actually, it was a way to connect with the community. So what we ended up doing is we launched a pop-up shop concept. Was like, well, let's test it. Let's see how it gets on. And that was one of the vital things. Kind of like, don't spend months and months and even years planning this stuff out. It's like, give it a go and see how you get on. So it was around about the November time of 2019 we launched this pop-up store, because one of my learnings from some time in retail is around that time a lot of the pop-up stores come out and landlords like to have somebody in for a short period of time so you get a cheap rent, basically. So it's all about time and opportunity. So we launched that, and we ran that all the way through until the February. And we ran it all the way through to the February for a very specific thing, because that was when it was the March. That was when obviously COVID hit the very first time, and I know we all forget about it, but that was when it came through. And what we did is we took the learning from that initial period, and then that morphed into what the overall Touchpoint store offer is now. So it's a little bit of quick learning. What did we learn? And then we launched it. We'd like to have launched it a lot sooner, but obviously everything that was going on, we just dates how to keep on put back. At the time, obviously, retail was closed largely, and you couldn't get people into shops. There was a no-go area. Now, there was an exemption for estate agents, of which our store kind of fell into, but we were looking at going back through it and thinking, well, now is probably not the time, because there's the footfall there. Can you get the experience right when you haven't managed it in all the ways that we did through COVID? But effectively, what we learned there and through all of that learning was a very simple concept in what we do in the store. We allow anyone, so you don't have to be a customer of 30, to come and spend as little or as much time with us as they like. So within the store, there is iPads where you can come and you can surf the internet, look at train times, you can do your Asda shop. We hope you buy a house or rent a house from us, which is the principal reason that we're there. But effectively, it's a bit like a community store. We have an area for children to come and play, and they can come and spend some time. In families can bring their dogs in. And the reason we did that is because fundamentally, we think, and I think very passionately, that a home is a family thing. In that, whether you are a single person, a couple, have children, don't have children, the concept of it is a family unit. And we know that lots of customers that we have also have pets. So what we said was, well, the pet is part of that journey. So we needed to bring people in. It was an interesting health and safety discussion, as you can trying to way through it. But then out of the back of the store, what we started to develop is not only getting people in, is also how do we help them, back to my earlier point, become the best version of themselves. So we have a full training and employability suite at the back of the store in Stockton. We're about to open our third store in Middlesbrough shortly, in the next sort of 6-7 weeks, and we've also opened one in Hull where we acquired some stock. And what we do in there is very simple. It's kind of you come in and you spend as much time as you want there, and we're there to help you basically. And what we do is we enable the colleagues that we've got in there to be free to use the skills and the experience that they've got. And what we did, is interesting, you touched on recruitment before. The people in the store have been recruited very differently. So there was no forms, there was no psychometric testing. Yeah. There was people discussions. It was how would you deal, and this is one of the things that we learned, from some of the other the retail companies, was how do you deal empathetically with people and how do you connect? So our people in the stores are recruited in a slightly different way around their softer skills and their ability to problem solve, rather than maybe some of the harder ways that we would have done it previously when, say, you want to recruit somebody with a specific skill set, you might run a test and things like that, say, and look at spreadsheets. So it's in what we've started to evolve through that is actually, we're just doing it now with the customer committee that we're recruiting to. We're doing video recruitment a lot more, because what we know is that, this isn't always true, but what we do find in a number of cases is that people that are good with people may not be good with paper and forms. How do we as a company get the best out of that candidate? Because I think too often it's about, have we put everyone through the same process to fill the same form in, etc., etc. When actually what you want to do is enable everybody in their differences to shine, and people shine in different ways, and it's about finding that balance.
It's fascinating, and it's such a good way of looking at it, because that's the way the world is now, right? Community centres, community at the heart of everything that we do. Apple stores, like you mentioned, people just go in and have a mill around, they talk to people, and the way that they do customer service is so relaxed and so unconventional, really, in the way that it works. So I think it's a great idea, and I'll make sure I'll link. Have you got a website for the stores, or have you got somewhere where people can get more information about them?
Yeah, there's more information on our website. So if they go to 13group.co.uk, there's more information. There's a section on it in there, and as I say, anyone's free to get in touch with me and have a chat, because it's probably one of the crown jewels that we have. And I wish football was as high as an Apple store. It's not quite there yet, but that's where we're trying to get to with the whole journey.
Amazing. And one thing that you've talked about a lot already is kind of like the customer is at the heart of me decision making. So with the stores, you thought about all of their needs. How big is the customer in when you're making big decisions for the organization, and how do you make sure they're felt, heard, seen in terms of when you're making big strategic decisions?
Yeah, no, we've done it in a few different ways, James, over time, and it's been I suppose evolving steadily. So sort of when I joined in 13, we had things like our customer involvement framework, our involved customers, and they give us some great insights as they look at things. And as we started to work with those customers, what we realized is we needed, I suppose, a wider sort of intake of thought and experience, and down to the point where it's kind of what we call the casual user. So somebody who's remotely interested in 13, but not necessarily a active customer, so they don't live in one of our homes or haven't bought a home from us and that kind of stuff. So what we started to do when we developed My 13 and in the touchpoint stores is we kind of went on a different route, where we had to be a bit brave in the sense that we give customers access into our inner workings of half-baked ideas. I think is the best way to describe it. So when we developed My 13, we had a prototype of a pilot, a sort of an alpha version of it coming up through the ranks, and I thought it was on the right lines, but I wasn't sure, because I didn't know if we were getting too clever is the best with it. And like when you go down these routes, people come up with loads of great ideas, but it's like, well, but is the customer going to use it? Are they going to think about that in that way that we do? So when we went down, we spent a bit of time with AO.com, and that's where we unashamedly pinched this idea from, was just to think about, well, actually, how you roll it out. So what we said was, get some of them in a room, different customers who want to do different things, and then just let them have a go. And it was all in very black and white, though it didn't look sexy or anything like that. It was very clunky and all of that. And we came out of it, and the feedback from the customers was overwhelmingly positive. They loved it, right? And then part of me is thinking, this is great, but this is also quite frightening, because it's quite frightening in the sense that is not really where we want to get to. but it's really great that they're engaging in it and they can see the usefulness of it. And I think what we then started to do throughout all of our journey is is embrace that braveness and not be scared to give customers early insights to things. And what we've basically been on that journey involving customers, we've done little things where we've introduced things. We've got a high-rise champion scheme that we've introduced, which is specific staff who do specific duties around high rises. Not a concierge. I'm always at pains to say. People always tell me in the business, it's not a concierge, Dave, so I always have to say it. But it's just based on customer feedback about some of the softer things they needed, presence, and it all ties into things around the tenant satisfaction measures in the white paper about how do people feel safe. And it's kind of those things that we can sit in our offices and we can brainstorm and we can innovate and we can do all this stuff, but actually customers will tell you stuff that you would never have really thought of. And then I suppose what the culmination of the journey has been over time is that we're in the process of, and we've launched our customer committee within our formal governance structure.
Okay.
And we've always had involved customers at the board level, but we didn't have a very specifically focused customer committee. So we've just worked with the board, and we've got some of the non-executive board members involved in that, but we're recruiting customers. The sort of the interest that we've had has been fascinating. We shortlisted, believe it or not, 11 people. So we've got to work through that. And now they're people who are living in our communities, keen to be engaged with 30. And I think it's that when we look at how we improve services, design services, it's thinking about, one, I suppose, being brave, exposing the washing lines and getting the dirty laundry out at times to say, these are causing us problems, is it a problem for you as a customer? But then keeping them engaged as you go through that, helping them, getting them to help you test things, test ideas as you go through it, and then ultimately involving them at those highest levels of strategic decision making, really.
Yeah, and it's such a big point. And we did some group chair recruitment for an organisation recently, and we put a part of the process was a video interview, or like almost a statement where it was like a tenant panel, and it was actually brilliant. Like, it just went down so well, where we got a panel of tenants together, 20 I think, and they all watched the videos from each candidate, and it was actually really fascinating to get the feedback of what they were all looking for, something slightly different from a candidate in that role.
I completely agree. We've got the sort of the director. When I came in, we had to recruit a couple of directors, and we started off a journey there. So customers are involved in all of our interviews now, and they are an active part of that recruitment process. And it's that point that if you're interviewing for a frontline member of staff or a manager at any level, having a customer's insight and whether they really think that person has empathy, can they engage with us, it's like gold. And it's stuff that I can sit in a room and interview a candidate and think, oh, they're tremendous. But actually then does a customer see a different side to somebody when they're out in the field? And it is definitely helping us find a better balance, having customers involved in that process.
100%. And I know you said something offline, which was keen to capture, which was, how do you make sure that you are seen, heard? And because, you've got a big role in what you're doing, and it'd be quite easy for you to sit in an office all day and just try and get feedback from your teams. But it sounds to me like you're quite a frontline leader, as I would like to call it, in terms of you want to see, you want to feel, you want to hear what's going on yourself. But how have you made sure you get a good balance of that, so you're hearing directly from customers?
Yeah, no, I think I'm always a bit critical of myself. I still don't think I do it often enough. But one of the things that I like to do is spend a lot of time in the field. So I've just come back from a couple of days down in Hull, where we recently acquired some stock. And one of the reasons that I like to do it is kind of like, reports tell you a lot of things, but it's about what I call triangulation. And I think you never really feel the real thing until you speak to a customer. So how is it for you? So I spend a lot of time out there. I do a lot of job shadowing as well. And I don't mean just going around with somebody, I mean actually doing the job. So I've been down to Hull, I've taken tiles off walls and had that whole experience. I think some of the trades were a little bit shocked at my handiwork. I'll be honest, it wasn't the best. It's been a long time since some of those things were done at any level of competency. But I think it's that real level of connection. And I think as we've gone through the last 2-3 years with all the stuff that we've been through as a country, as a world population, I think what I realised is that the heart of a lot of this is connectivity. And it doesn't matter what we all do, lots of us do different jobs, but all of us have got something to give. And I think if we, as housing providers, aren't in touch with our communities, aren't spending time in our communities, it's very difficult to pick up on really what is going on. And I think I'm totally in agreement with approaches like the tenant satisfaction measures and where we're getting to in terms of the regulatory world. And I think it's great, and it's going to help improve our robustness, our accountability as a sector. It still won't replace time spent in that field finding out what's really going on, though, because you might have great results, but I think, like my experience over the last couple of days, I know despite our performance looking good, there's things that just didn't feel right when I was there yesterday, and I wouldn't have had that engagement with the customers and the colleagues, understanding what's working for them, not working for them. And what you find is sometimes we sit and we always think about the big strategic things, but actually day to day, it's not. It's the little things. It's the simple things that really matter. It's did we fulfill that promise? Did we go back to that customer? And then what we've got to do is continuously keep on top of that and keep delivering. And that's one of the little mottos that we have, is just to continuously deliver for our customers, no matter how big or small the thing is.
And what have you seen? I don't like talking about the pandemic because I find it quite difficult, but I think, how have you found you've had to adapt or change your services in that period? Because, I imagine the variety of complaints, problems, things you need to do your customers has drastically changed in that period.
Yeah, I think there's probably a few different ways it changed. I think we've been looking at what we called one of our drivers underneath us is our big three. And what we mean by that is we're looking at the quality of our services, and the speed and the responsiveness of our services, and the consistency that we deliver through them. And what we're trying to continuously do is ask ourselves all the time, are we hitting those for people? I think as we've gone through the pandemic, I think customers went on a bit of a roller coaster. I think as we started through it, people didn't really care. It was bigger things to worry about, which is understandable. So did they need their housing provider? Probably not. They didn't want to talk. They didn't really want to engage. They still wanted things like emergency repairs completed and all of that. Don't get me wrong. But as time sort of moved on, I think, and we come to, dare I say it, more normalised times, which sounds a bit weird when there's wars going on.
I know.
But as we come back to a more normal day-to-day life, I think expectations of customers are definitely rising. And I don't think it's expectations of how great your service is, but I think it's expectations of how responsive you are to them. And I think one of the things that we noticed through COVID is that there was a lot of suppressed demand, is how I would call it. So people didn't phone you about a repair, or they didn't phone you about a neighbour issue. But as we're coming out of it, I think customers haven't spent so long in their homes, so long in the vicinity of their home. They notice more. So I think, I'm not going to say people have become less tolerant of each other, but I think people are looking around, and they do become a little bit more bothered than they probably used to about certain things that go on. Yeah. Something that they might have walked past last week or 2 years ago, now is always going to be sticking in their mind, and they want to talk about it. I think people want their repairs done quicker than they may have previously waited a little bit longer for. So, as an example, we used to run future demand at around about 3,500 appointments. As me and you stand here today talking, we've got 7,500 jobs in the system.
Wow.
So our demand is doubled. Some of that is latent demand that didn't get reported, don't get me wrong, but I actually think we are seeing an increase in expectation that people want. And what that does is, obviously, that places a lot of pressure on the system. So if we look at things like the TSMs, the rent capping potential that's coming over the horizon, all of that is coming at the same time where you've really got perception and expectation increasing. There's going to be a moment where those two roads collide, and it's our job as leaders to work out what's the best way to suffice those demands that are being placed on us within the boundaries that we have available.
Yeah, It's an eye of a storm situation, isn't it? Because I agree with you. I speak to a lot of leaders and they're saying the same thing. Expectation is generally going up. And I spoke to some friends the other day and it's interesting, but he has a fully remote role and he's noticed things he's never noticed before. Neighbours are a bit noisy during the day. Someone's got a band playing in the bottom of the street. And I wonder if that's the same with repairs, like, do you notice repairs more and do you notice things that irritate you more if you're spending the majority of your day doing a remote role, working from home, not working, but being in your house more frequently? Maybe it's just people in their environment much more. They're spotting and thinking, like, I actually do need that repair fixing because I'm sick of looking at it all day long. I don't know.
I definitely think they do. I think, well, I would say I would do it, but my wife keeps us right and she continuously does it all the time because there's always another job that needs to be done around the house. But I think people have become more aware of their own surroundings during this period and what really matters to them. I think as a result, what we've been looking at our complaints, I think probably like a lot of providers, we don't get inundated with complaints in that, because I think when we think about complaints, we think about stage 1, stage 2, ombudsman and things of that nature. But what we've started to change our focus on is to what we call is expressions of dissatisfaction. So we introduced about 2 years ago now stage 0 as part of our complaints process. But what that stage 0 is, it's basically anybody's expression of dissatisfaction. So they don't need to say I'm complaining, but what they're telling you is they are unhappy. Yeah. And that could be about anything. That could be about a repair, the rent, or anything. And what we try to do now is capture all of those and look at the patterns of them. Because I think what we got to a point was that if we were looking to improve services on complaints output, the output numbers weren't there. So we were getting roughly around about 40, 50 complaints a month. So you're talking about 500 complaints a year out of 36,000 properties, out of probably 700,000 interactions. So you kind of go, right, so there's not the volume of that intelligence there to warrant massive change. But when we started to look at expressions of dissatisfaction, it gets a bit richer. So I'm not saying we've got hundreds of thousands of expressions of dissatisfaction, but what we have is a bigger sample size now. And what that's enabled us to do is it's getting a granular look at what's causing people grief on a day-to-day basis. And then how does that flow through? So some of that flows through to complaints, but some of it doesn't. So where did that come? So then now what you're able to do is say, well, where are those kind of complaints coming from? Because it looks as though there isn't a point of escalation. So if you think about it, nobody's saying, oh, I'm not happy with this, I'm not happy with that, and then complaining. Some of our complaints are just bang, I'm complaining about this. So you're able to then take your sort of appropriate action through having a look at everything. But I think a lot of that is born out of really being close to your customer. Because if you haven't got that way to capture that, and we've had to change the way that we've done our complaints processes, our systems needed to be reconfigured to work out how we would capture all of this, but it's really helping us get a clearer line of sight on what's causing issues.
Yeah, and stage 0 is much better than it coming to complaint, right? So you'd rather fix some of the trends within stage 0 and say, right, I don't know, 1,000 complaints or 1,000 stage 0s are saying that we should, I don't know, do this after we've completed a repair. Fine, fix it before it becomes a complaint, can't you? At that stage.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that ties into sort of our big 3 around our responsiveness. And what we're trying to do is let's respond in the moment of the issue. Let's get it done, then it fixes. I think what we see in a lot of our complaints is that what lets us down when we do get, I always say this, we do get things wrong, is we aren't responding to the customer in a timely or appropriate fashion. So sometimes they've kind of told 3 or 4 members of staff and it hasn't been fixed. And then they're like, well, I'm just fed up now. And then lands inevitably will come to my desk at some point when they've reached that level of frustration. And we sit down, and a lot of what I do at those points, I go and see colleagues and speak to them about it and try and understand what went on. And then I think where we've got to is that we realise that through a lot of these, the tools and the answers were all things in people's gift. What we just didn't do is see it early enough. And that's the bit where I say we'll be more responsive to it and really fix it in the moment.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've got a couple of other things I want to talk to you about, but one thing for me is around, is there this instantaneous world that we live in now where everyone wants everything tomorrow? You order something off Amazon and you want it today or tomorrow, and the world lives now around this, everything's got to be rapid. Now, I know we talked offline about this, but digitalisation is a big thing right now. But in the housing sector, we've got to think about our customer before we digitalise everything. But obviously, if you want something instant with your bank, you self-serve yourself in most cases now. How have you, what's the journey been like for you from a digitalisation point of view? And how have you sort of found that transition into becoming more kind of digital for your customers?
Yeah, no, James. So I think I agree and I disagree about everyone wanting everything now.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is I think there is certain things that customers do want now, straight away, sorted. But I also think there is customers that if you explain with empathy and understanding are prepared to wait. So what we did within 13 is we offered choice, and that was a big driver of digitalization. And we set off on the My 13 journey with the very simple concept of omni-channel. And what we mean by that, because I think sometimes this gets confused, is that through an omni-channel approach is no matter how you experience us, whether that be on the phone, face-to-face, or digitally, you'll get the same experience. So if you can raise a repair, you can do it on all of those channels. If you can book an appointment, you can do it on all of those channels. And that was our mantra, that it had to be the same experience no matter how you did it. Yeah. Now, that's a very big test for housing providers, because I think if you look at where we were as an example, we'd never exposed sort of key business processes to the customer. Yes, we had a customer portal. They could log on to that and they could have a look at the rent statement, but that was about it. We had 800 users of our old customer portal. My 13 today has over 34,000 customers on it.
Wow.
That's in about 2 years from a standing start of nobody at all being on it. That was largely driven through building a compelling offer with customers. But what it was about was using digitalization and digital tools to fix what really mattered to the customer in those now moments. So, for example, our approach to lettings, and we use things like Google Maps to pinpoint and do street view. It's amazing the amount of time that saved a housing officer from having to go and show somebody so they can see things. But also within Google Maps, it's things like what we're able to do now is surface to the customer their closest school, their closest hospital, their closest shops, train station, because that was what really mattered. But if you go on the market or something like that, it's pretty simple. That's all the stuff that if we're looking to move, we'll go and have a look at. But for some reason, we as a social housing provider decided not to use that kind of approach. So we kind of amended that. Other things, so like rent statements. Everyone loves a rent statement, and I always use this story about digitalization because I think it encapsulates where a lot of housing providers may have been. We always have to deal with the intricacies of benefit payments and benefit flows in the regular payment. But with a lot of the housing management systems, you don't get that real-time accurate view because it depends where the benefit payment got put in. So I spent a lot of time at the start of this journey sitting in our contact centre and understanding what's going on. And I used to see everyone get their calculators out and be tapping away. And I was like, what we're doing? And they're like, oh, it's just customer wants their rent balance. So I was sitting there saying, all right. So I was like, so looking at the computer. So I was like, no, the computer doesn't tell me. I said, I have to work this out, work out where we are in the week. And then and I'm like, right, excellent. So the issues that then creates is obviously profound. And I thought this would be an easier way of doing this. So simply what we do with rents now is people can still have a rent statement like at any point in the year, but we take in the simple concept of what Santander Bank use with your charges and your transactions. So as you and I look at our bank statements online, that is how a customer's rent statement now works for us. So they see their payments coming in on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. They see their charges getting levied against it, and whether that be their rent charge, their service charge, their garage charge, or whichever it is, broken down. And I think it's that concept of when it comes to digital, I think what we've got to really think about and very carefully, probably as a sector, but as all individual organizations, is what matters to each of our customers will be different. And the experience that we want to have, the 13 experience, may be completely opposed to what a customer who is in another housing association wants. And that's fine. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it wrong. It just means you tailor for your customers. And I think once you get that concept of that why, what becomes easier is understanding that the technology is a means to deliver that. It is not the thing you are doing in of itself. So we very much, our digital journey to date is is focused principally on three things. It's been the rents in the transactions that I was talking about. It's been people's ability to rent a home from us and then raise a repair. And across all of those now, what the customer has is full control. And I always think this is an important point, that under our old lettings process, pretty traditional, people had to come in with their documents, and then somebody would go off to the back and photocopy them, and all that jazz would have 2 copies, and all that would get filed and everything like that. What we do now is the customer, either with us or entirely by themselves, they can either upload via a photo or via an original the document straight into the portal, which we then pick up and verify. It stays with that customer throughout their journey with us. So they upload a medical report, it's there forever until the needs change and they put a new one in. And it just saving time, both for the customer, but for us. So the customer now doesn't have to take a half a day off work or come out of the way of inconvenience. They just get it done there and then. Really simple, really done. Repairs, they can book their own appointment time for repairs. They don't have to phone us if they don't want it. Now, lots of customers still do phone us, but it goes back to choice. Some people like to phone us. And we always, in repairs, and especially emergency repairs are a great example, which is, you could build, I believe, the most sophisticated system in the world to deal with repairs. If you've got water coming out of your house in some very serious hour at a time, you're going to call no matter how that platform is, you ain't going on it. So it's that it's kind of saying, well, what matters to the customer? How do we give them that choice and that ease of accessibility, and then use digital to help you on that journey?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And as we wrap up, because I mean, there's so much I wanted to ask you about. I just think we'll run out of time. But there's a couple of things. I mean, it's never been harder, I don't think, to be a leader in housing at the moment. Never. I mean, customer service, development, whatever part of the business you work in, it's never been harder. And the rent cap's going to have a massive impact on that. But what do you see the rent cap going to have an impact? And if we look specifically in your role in customer service, what do you think that's going to do to what we can achieve for our customers?
Yeah, so through the lens of customer services, it is, if you look at it in some ways, there's extremely difficult choices ahead. The rent cap in of itself genuinely will be of benefit to customers. So I know sometimes we stereotype, don't we? We think of, traditionally people may think that all customers in social housing are on benefits, and therefore if you cap the increase in the rents, or whatever the increase in the rents, the benefit system will take that straight. I think that I can understand that sense of prevalent thought. There is a lot of customers within social housing though who aren't benefit dependent, either wholly or partly, and shared owners, some of our shared owners. And sometimes when we talk about rental uplifts, and although some of those products are exempt from it means you have to make difficult choices about, well, actually, where do you pitch your rents? Now, historically, over time, obviously, the reason for the sector, and as I was a raison d'etre of it, is that we are providing sub-market housing at affordable prices. So affordability of customers is very much what we drive our decision making on and look at. And then when you come to this scenario where it's kind of, well, the rents may go up by an arbitrary figure, or they may not go up at all. We don't know what exactly is going to come out of the government in time. But what we do know is our costs are going up. So the costs to supply materials, for example, in the repairs team or the investment team, they then place pressure on that overall system. So that's where our difficult choices come. But I think what we've got to all do, and in each association will be different, and it comes back to what we were talking about before, is really what matters to the customer. Do we have services that we've run for years that actually people very rarely access? Have we created burdensome processes that are not providing value to the customer? Every housing association has different challenges in that space. But I think what we have to do is each address those challenges, and then that'll start to give us all individually a clear way forward. But I think when it comes to looking at those services, I think we started a little bit with mum and gran, and I think that's where I always like to finish on these kind of questions about that all of us have got to make that decision about, well, would it make my mum proud, and would I treat me gran like that? And I think that's when we can then really step back and go, well, whatever that rent capping decision ends up being, what are we going to hold dear to how we deliver services, and then that is where we'll, as the Chancellor said, make those eye-wateringly difficult decisions. I think he prefaced that in a government sense, but I think that matters to us all. And I think if we get that right as each housing provider and we continually deliver for our customers and our community, no matter how difficult this forthcoming period could be, we'll come out with that with a little bit of credibility from our customers, despite the challenges and the difficulties that we'll all face.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think I was going to ask you another question, but I think that's a lovely way to wrap up, because I think it's probably going to be the answer to the question I had, which was, what do we think the future 6 months looks like? And it is that, isn't it? It's customers first. It's all the things you've talked about today, about putting that test to ourselves around, are we delivering the best service we can for customers, regardless of financial constraints or whatever, and would our mum or mom say about our services and how we deliver them. One thing I know will come out of this, because we haven't done loads around the customer element, is that people are going to want to reach out to you. Are they happy to do so? You're happy for people to reach out on LinkedIn if they've got any questions or any follow-ups?
Yeah, more than happy, James. My LinkedIn profile's there. Email address, I think, is on there as well, but it's david.ripley@13group.co.uk. And more than happy if anyone wants to come up, have a visit, see the store, see my 13 in action, and happy to share that, because I think any problem we've overcome, somebody else may be facing, they may take that little bit of inspiration away and take it forward. But yeah, more than happy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, and hopefully catch up with you soon.
No, thank you, James. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers, mate.